Hello and welcome back to Skyline. I'm Trithiyatri and tonight we begin with a simple question. What happens when diplomacy moves faster than a war? Because in the last few days, let's be honest here, something extraordinary has happened. Countries that were exchanging missiles, they are now exchanging agreements. Leaders who were threatening each other, they are now sitting across negotiating table. In fact, old allies, they are questioning each other. New partnerships are taking shape. And in the middle of all of this, India is quietly expanding its global influence. If you connect all the dots, they tell you a much bigger story. A story about changing power, changing alliances, and a changing world order. Well, tonight we bring you 9 amazing stories that explain why the entire world may be entering a completely new chapter. So let's start with the first one here. We are going to talk about a very small Caribbean island. Well, when people talk about India's foreign policy, they usually think about Washington or Moscow or Beijing. Very few people, they think about Trinidad and Tobago, right? But perhaps they should, because this teeny tiny Caribbean nation, it has suddenly become the center of one of India's biggest diplomatic successes. India's External Affairs Minister, Dr. S. Jaishankar, he recently completed a very important visit to Trinidad and Tobago. And the outcome was remarkable, by the way. Not just one agreement, not two, 8 different agreements. Can you think about what that really means? These are not any symbolic announcements here. These are real partnerships covering healthcare, tourism, renewable energy, infrastructure, in fact, education, Ayurveda, and the development projects. India will help modernize important public infrastructure. India will support healthcare facility. India will strengthen educational cooperation as well. And perhaps the most emotional project of all, India will help restore Nelson Island. It's very, very important because that island, it holds a very special place in history. More than a century ago, thousands of Indian indentured labor, they first arrived over there before beginning their new lives in the Caribbean. Today, their descendants, they form one of Trinidad and Tobago's most vibrant communities. So this is not just any diplomacy that we are talking about. It is history coming full circle. In fact, during the visit, Dr. Jaishankar, he also handed over the first batch of 2,000 laptops for the school children. He inaugurated an agro-processing facility supported by India. In fact, he also inaugurated the country's new National Prosthetics Center here. Every project, it sends the same message. India is no longer limiting its diplomacy to words now. Well, it is delivering development. It is delivering technology. It is delivering opportunity. And perhaps the biggest announcement of all, it came after the financial sector. Because TNT, it has now become the first Caribbean nation to adopt India's UPI payment platform. That's right. Think about that for a moment. An Indian digital payment system expanding thousands of kilometers away, becoming part of another country's financial future. That is soft power. That is digital diplomacy, and that is India's growing global influence. And while India strengthened friendship across the Caribbean, the political spotlight in America, it has unexpectedly shifted towards one Indian origin woman. Because sometimes the biggest political debate, it's not about policies, right? Sometimes it is about a dress. Well, politics can be really strange. Sometimes elections dominate the headlines. Sometimes speeches do, and sometimes an $8 dress that becomes national news. And that's exactly what happened with the US Second Lady, Indian origin, Usha Vance. It all began after she appeared in a Father's Day podcast episode wearing a simple maternity dress purchased from the Old Navy. Nothing expensive, nothing luxurious, just an ordinary dress for everyone. But then came a surprising article. The New York Times suggested that her clothing choice, it carried political symbolism. The article argued that the outfit, it reflected messaging around the family values, motherhood, and modern conservative politics. Suddenly, a simple maternity dress, it became a national political conversation. But Mrs. Vance, she had the perfect response. Instead of becoming angry, she laughed. That's right, she revealed that the dress originally cost $50, but she bought it for just $8.75. And then she joked that if anybody wanted to analyze her wardrobe further, they should also examine her compression socks and elastic waist trouser. Well, her husband, Vice President J.D. Vance, he joined the fun. He kind of joked that anyone capable of saving over 8% on a dress should probably become America's budget director. The internet, they loved it. Because in an age where every public appearance it is analyzed, sometimes the simplest response that becomes the smartest one. But while America debates fashion, a major and a big battle is taking place inside America's courtrooms. One that could reshape the future of artificial intelligence itself. Because one lawsuit, it can decide who really owns the information powering the AI revolution here. Well, if we talk about AI, it is changing the world faster than anybody ever imagined. Every day, millions of people, they use AI to write emails, search for the information, solve problems, in fact, create presentation and even write computer codes. What once looked like maybe science fiction, it has now become part of everyday life. But behind this technology revolution, a massive legal battle, it is quietly unfolding. One that could reshape the future of AI itself. This week, 35 newspaper publishers from across the United States filed a major lawsuit against OpenAI and Microsoft. Together, these publishers own nearly 4% newspapers spread across 33 American states. Their allegation, that's serious. They claim that their news articles, they were copied and they were used to train artificial intelligence systems without any permission and without any kind of payment. According to the lawsuit, automated programs allegedly collected articles from newspaper website, including content that was placed behind the paywalls. In fact, the publisher, they further claimed that copyright information, author's name, and publication details, they were removed before the article became part of AI training data sets. Wait, in simple words, they believe years of original journalism, they were used to build powerful AI models without any proper authorization. This particular case, it is much bigger than one company or maybe one lawsuit. It raises a serious question that the entire world is trying to answer. Who owns information in the age of artificial intelligence? Should AI companies pay for the content that they use, or does the technology innovation requires access to publicly available information? In the meantime, the publishers, they argue that journalism costs money. Reporters investigate stories. In fact, editors verify the facts here. Photographers travel to dangerous locations. Newspapers invest millions of dollars to produce reliable reporting. Now, if artificial intelligence companies can freely use that work, they ask, well, how will independent journalism survive here? In the meantime, OpenAI and Microsoft has consistently maintained that AI development, it can qualify as fair use under the copyright law, and have defended that the way that their systems are trained, it is legal. In the meantime, the courts will ultimately decide these legal questions. But one thing is definitely clear. Whatever the final verdict may be, this case, it could become one of the most important legal battles in the history of artificial intelligence. The outcome may influence not only technology companies but also the authors, filmmakers, musicians, publishers, educators, or maybe content creators around the globe. Because when technology moves faster than the law, the courts are often left to decide the near future. And yes, while America debates artificial intelligence inside courtrooms, another invitation from West Asia, it is creating headlines across the globe. Because Iran has extended an invitation that could place India at the center of another major diplomatic event. Diplomacy, it often sends a message without saying very much. Sometimes a single invitation, it can reveal more than an official statement. Well, that is exactly what happened this particular week. Ladies and gentlemen, Iran has reportedly invited the Prime Minister of India, Mr. Narendra Modi, to attend the funeral ceremony of their former Supreme Leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. This information, it comes at a time when the whole West Asia, it is still recovering from weeks of conflicts, uncertainty, intense diplomatic negotiations. Now we see India's POV. This is a very delicate moment. New Delhi shares long-standing civilization ties with Iran. At the very same time, India also maintains strategic partnership with the United States, Israel, several other Gulf nations. In fact, very few countries have managed to maintain strong relations with all the sides, and that too in such a complicated region. That is why every diplomatic move it is carefully watched. The information itself carries symbolic importance, by the way. It reflects the relationship India has built with Iran over many decades now. Energy cooperation, connectivity projects like Chabar Port, cultural exchanges, and historical links have connected both the nations despite any changing global policy. And yes, at the very same time, the Indian government has advised its own citizens to avoid any non-essential travel to Iran until and unless the security situation improves completely. Although conditions have become more stable in recent days, but officials they continue to exercise caution here. This highlights the difficult balancing act India faces. Protect strategic partnership, maintain diplomatic neutrality, safeguard Indian citizens, and continue engaging with all the superpowers. And that balancing act, it has become one of India's biggest strengths on the global stage. But while diplomacy continues, tension inside the Gulf, it has not disappeared completely. Because Iran is once again making strong statements about the American military presence in the region. Well, the war may have slowed down, the negotiations may have begun, but the rhetoric, it has certainly not disappeared. This particular week, Iran once again criticized the United States military presence in the Gulf. Iranian officials argued that the American forces are creating insecurity and increasing division across the region. This particular statement, it came shortly after a joint declaration issued by the United States and members of the Gulf Cooperation Council. Here, Tehran described the whole position as intervention, provocation, and irresponsible. And wait, at the center of this discussion is one of the world's most strategically important waterways, the Strait of Hormuz. Every single day, millions of barrels of oil travels through this narrow passage. So any disruption immediately affects global energy prices. In fact, financial markets, shipping companies, and consumers around the globe. And that is why every statement coming from Iran, it is closely monitored now. And yes, at the very same time, another important development has taken place. The International Atomic Energy Agency has just confirmed that the interim peace agreement provides the inspectors with access to Iran's nuclear program. Although, wait, the discussion over the scope and the timing of inspections, that is still continuing. But for the supporters of diplomacy, this represents progress. But for the critics, many questions remain unanswered. Can inspections guarantee transparency here? In fact, will sanctions eventually be lifted? Can both the ends trust each other enough to reach a permanent agreement? These answers, they are still uncertain, but one thing is becoming increasingly clear. The next few weeks could determine whether this peace process, it succeeds or it collapses. And yes, even as diplomats continue talking, new military incidents are reminding the entire world just how fragile the whole situation remains. And yes, just when many believed the tension were finally beginning to ease, another incident reminded the entire world how fragile peace in West Asia really is. Diplomatic meetings are taking place. Negotiators are talking, world leaders are calling for restraint, but on the ground, the whole situation that remains extremely volatile. This week, reports emerged that a commercial vessel operating near Oman was struck by a projectile after passing through the waters close to the Strait of Hormuz. In fact, according to the US officials, the merchant ship, it was allegedly targeted by an Iranian drone operated by the IRGC. Here, Iran has repeatedly denied similar accusations in the past too. But this whole incident, it has once again raised fear that shipping route in the Gulf, that remains under serious threat. Why this really matters? Because the Strait of Hormuz, that is not just another waterway. It is one of the world's most important maritime choke points. Nearly 1/5 of the world's oil, the supply, it passes through this narrow stretch of water every single day. More than 20 million barrels of crude oil and maybe petroleum products that moves through this particular strait daily. connecting producers in the Gulf with markets in Asia, Europe, North America. If this route it is disrupted even for a few days, global energy prices could rise sharply. Insurance costs could increase, shipping companies could face the delays, and countries around the globe begin feeling the economic impact. This is exactly why governments across the globe they are watching every development in the Gulf. Even countries located thousands of kilometers away depend on the safe movement of the ships through these waters. Name it: India, China, Japan, South Korea, and several other European nations import a significant portion of their energy supplies through this route. So any instability, it immediately affects fuel prices, transportation costs, inflation, and global market. Ladies and gentlemen, the latest attack, it has also complicated an international effort just to evacuate stranded commercial vessels from the Persian Gulf. According to the reports, the International Maritime Organization temporarily paused the plans just to move the ships through the evacuation corridor until and unless adequate safeguard guarantees could be confirmed here. Officials are now reassessing the whole security situation before allowing more vessels to pass. And in the meantime, Hezbollah, Iran's backbone, it has also intensified its rhetoric. The group's leadership, it has demanded that Israeli forces withdraw unconditionally from Lebanon, claiming that the recent US-Iran peace agreement, it demonstrates that Washington and Tel Aviv, they all failed to achieve their military objectives. Such statements have once again increased tension along the Israel-Lebanon border, where even a small miscalculation, it could trigger another round of violence. And yes, at the very same time, another important development has quietly taken place. The International Atomic Energy Agency has confirmed that the interim peace agreement provides inspectors with access to Iran's nuclear facility. However, Iranian officials have indicated that inspections at some key sites may remain restricted until a final agreement is reached and sanctions are lifted. So this means negotiations are still far from over. So while diplomats continue talking about peace, military forces remain on high alert. Commercial ships continue sailing through the dangerous water. Intelligence agencies continue monitoring every single moment. And global market continue reacting to every headline emerging from the region. Well, the war may no longer dominate the front pages every day, but the West Asia is still standing on a knife's edge. One drone strike, one military launch, one attack on a commercial vessel, or maybe one diplomatic misunderstanding, it could once again push the entire region towards a much larger crisis. And yes, as if these challenges were not enough, new intelligence claims they are now raising uncomfortable questions about secret regional partnership and whether one of America's closest allies may have quietly helped one of Washington's biggest rivals. Sometimes the biggest geopolitical stories, they are not about missiles. They are about money, about intelligence report. In fact, they are about the relationship that operate very quietly behind the scenes. This week, a new intelligence report has triggered fresh controversy across West Asia. Well, according to reports, Qatar, one of America's closest partners in the Gulf, allegedly expanded its economic cooperation with Iran after the United States withdrew from the nuclear agreement in 2018. Now, this is very important to note that these are allegations contained in an intelligence report, and neither Qatar or Iran, and nobody has publicly accepted these claims. But the report, it has already sparked intense debate because of what it suggests. According to the report, Qatar allegedly continued maintaining close economic links with Tehran during a period when the United States was trying to isolate Iran through sanctions. It also claims that billions of dollars belonging to Iran that remained frozen in Qatar and could now become accessible under the latest US-Iran peace agreement. The report goes even further. It alleges that certain dual-use material, items that can have both civilian and military application, it may have reached Iran. Now, these materials, according to the report, it could potentially be used in industries connected to missile fuel or maybe drone technology. Again, let me clear this out that these claims have not been independently verified and no public response has yet been issued by Qatar. But this matters because Qatar is not just another country in West Asia. It hosts one of America's biggest military bases in the region, Al Udeid Air Base. That's right, thousands of American troops are stationed over there. The base has played a major role in the US military operations across Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria, and the wider Gulf for maybe decades now. That means if these allegations generate further scrutiny, well, they could create uncomfortable questions for Washington. Can America fully trust one of its closest regional partners? Can a country maintain strong relations with both the US and Iran at the same time? Or is this simply another example of West Asian diplomacy where countries often maintain relationships with rival powers just to protect their own national interests? Here, experts say the Gulf region has always operated differently from traditional allies. In fact, countries often cooperate with one nation on security, another one on trade, and another one on energy. Survival in West Asia that often depends on balancing relationships rather than choosing sides. Well, for now, the intelligence report that remains unverified, and the story it continues to develop. But one thing is certain here. It has once again reminded the entire world that in West Asia, alliances are rarely as simple as they appear. And yes, while these intelligence reports continue making headlines, another diplomatic warning has emerged from Tehran, one that has once again placed Israel on high alert. Ladies and gentlemen, while diplomats they continue talking about peace, military commanders they are still talking about the war. That's right. Just when many believed that the ceasefire had reduced tension, another explosive statement has once again pushed the entire West Asia into the global spotlight. Iran's Quds Force commander, General Ismail Khani, he has issued one of Tehran's strongest public warning in recent months. According to reports, he declared that Israel must withdraw from southern Lebanon or risk being forced to flee. These words immediately attracted international attention. Why? Because every statement made by commander of Quds, it carries a lot of weight. Now, the Quds Force, it is the overseas operation wing of Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. It has played a major role in Iran's military strategy across Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, and Yemen. So, whenever its commander speaks, intelligence agencies, military planners, or maybe the government around the globe pay the attention. The warning comes at a time when tension along the Israel-Lebanon border that remains extremely fragile. Although larger-scale fighting it has reduced following the recent peace agreement, maybe occasional exchanges of fire and military activity continue to keep both the sides on high alert. Now, the statement it has also fueled speculation across international media. That's right. Could another confrontation begin anytime soon? The world is really scared. Is this simply psychological pressure or maybe just a fake story? Well, lastly, is Iran attempting to strengthen its negotiation position while peace talks do continue? Well, for now, there is no official evidence suggesting an attack is imminent here. Well, military analysts caution that such statements they are often intended to send political and strategic messaging rather than announce the immediate military action here. Nevertheless, Israel continues maintaining a high military alert across the western border. In fact, surveillance operations remain active, air defense systems continue operating, and security officials are monitoring every development very carefully. Well, the bigger concern is that one mistake, it could rapidly change the whole situation. Basically, one rocket, one drone, one cross-border incident, and that could be enough to trigger another dangerous escalation. That is exactly why world leaders, they continue urging restraint. Because after months of conflict, nobody wants another war just to begin, just when diplomacy appears to be making progress here. But perhaps the biggest surprise of all, that is not coming from Iran. It is coming from Washington. Because America's latest military decision is creating fresh questions inside Israel itself. Sometimes your closest ally makes a decision that leaves even its strongest friends completely surprised. Well, for decades, the relationship between the US and Israel, it has been considered one of Washington's strongest strategic partnership. Well, both the nations have shared intelligence, in fact, military technology, with that defense cooperation and common security objectives. But recent developments suggest that regional politics may be entering a new phase now. According to reports, the US is moving forward with a military package worth nearly $700 million that could strengthen Turkey's air capabilities. Although the proposal is still attracting political attention here, it has already generated concern inside Israel. Why? Because relation between Turkey and Israel, it has become increasingly tense over the past several years. Both the nations have disagreed over Gaza, regional security, broader West Asian policy. In fact, diplomatic exchanges have frequently turned into public disagreement. Now, the possibility of enhanced American military support for Turkey, it has naturally raised a lot of questions. Is Washington changing its priorities? Is the US trying to maintain a balance between regional powers, or is this simply part of broader NATO strategy rather than message directed at Israel? Well, experts believe the answer it is likely more complicated. Turkey remains one of NATO's most important members. It controls access to the Black Sea through the Bosporus Strait. Well, it occupies one of the world's most strategic geographic locations, connecting Europe, Asia, and West Asia. In the meantime, from Washington's POV, maintaining strong defense ties with Ankara, that remains important despite any political disagreement. And at the very same time, Israeli officials continue watching every development very carefully, because every military sale has kind of potential to influence the regional balance of power. The story also comes at a particularly sensitive moment because Israel is already adjusting to the new US-Iran peace process. Regional allies are shifting. In fact, diplomatic priorities are evolving, and countries across West Asia are recalculating their strategies. Well, tonight's final story reminds us of one important reality. International politics that can never stand still. Today's ally may disagree tomorrow. Today's rival may negotiate next week, and today's peace agreement may completely reshape tomorrow's balance of power. In the end, from India's growing diplomatic influence in the Caribbean to America's legal battle over AI, from Iran's lasting warning across West Asia, maybe, from Qatar's controversial intelligence report to Washington's evolving relation with Turkey, tonight's headlines that prove one thing very clearly. The world is changing faster than ever before. Old alliances are being tested, new partnerships are emerging, and every diplomatic decision that is taken today, it could shape tomorrow's global order. Thank you for joining me on Skyline. I am Dhruti Athri, and I'll see you in the next episode.